So a few years ago, we reported that, yes, you can indeed measure the transitions between the two isomers using single molecule FRET, where we attach the two molecules, the donor acceptor, to the two arms of the four-way junction, and bind it to a third arm for surface immobilization. And then measure FRET as a function of time to show that yes, it does go back and forth, and you can determine the rate of fluctuations very accurately from these measurements. The next question here is the following. So what happens if you apply force to this arm that is not labeled? Then by intuition, one can argue that, well, what the force is trying to do is to maximize the distance between the two attachment points, here and here, which is larger on this isoform than here. So if you apply strong enough force, then the state B will be favored over state A. And so with this labeling configuration, the low FRET state will be more populated at high forces. Of course, that's the theory, but unless you actually do the measurement, you don't really know whether that will actually happen before DNA falls apart using the chemical strain. So the way we did the measurement was to extend this arm by 12 nucleotides that is complementary to the lambda phase DNA, which is about 50 kilobases long. So if you fully stretch this DNA, then you get about 60 micrometer of separation between the two ends of the DNA. This other end is attached to a micrometer size E, which that you can then grab using a focused IR laser beam in an optical track configuration. And then use a confocal microscope in this case to excite this molecule and measure fluorescence from the same this molecule here. So these two measurements can be done without mutual interference. So what you can do, you can measure, you can basically have a certain separation at certain force and measure the FRET signal for 10 seconds. And then you increase the force and then measure for another 10 seconds and so on. The result is shown here. The FRET as a function of time from a single DNA molecule for 10 seconds, showing nice two-state fluctuations with more or less equal population between the two states. And this was measured at a low force, around 0.3 piconewton. And if you're lucky, then the molecule does not follow this, you can take another 10 seconds of data at a higher force, and that's the data. And then you go to even higher force, 1 piconewton. Then you start to see visually some evidence that the low FRET state is getting more populated as you expect. You go to 1.7 piconewton, now the bias is very clear. And then at 3 piconewton, the bias is almost complete. So yes, the technique actually works. And if you go back to the low force, then you recover the same behavior. So you're not doing any irreversible mechanical damage to the DNA. And afterwards, we can fit the data, for example, hidden marker modeling, to extract the kinetic rates going back and forth accurately for different forces. And the results are shown here. And what was surprising about the result is that, well, let me just tell you that this, the green curve here, this rate versus force, is for the reaction going forward, and that actually becomes faster as you increase the force, which is the expected direction. The red curve is for the backward rate, which becomes slower as you increase the force. Again, expected, but what we didn't expect was the fact that this the backward reaction has a higher slope. So you have a stronger force dependence on the backward reaction. In fact, if you have a simple physical chemistry kind of picture, this will be consistent with having a single barrier that lies closer to the state of the left side, so that when you tilt the energy by applying force, then the barrier height will change much less for the forward reaction than for the backward reaction. Then you can actually do this for many different directions of pulling. So this is what we did initially. and then we also pull on a different direction. And then this is the third direction that we could. In fact, many of the data were taken by robots sitting in the audience. So by combining all this data of mapping the energy landscape of the molecule in multi-dimension, we were able to propose that this open state is really an intermediate, and then there are two transition states separated into three states. And the structure, we were even able to deduce the structure of the transition states shown here. And in fact, you can actually add a bit of a biological scheme by looking at the DNA co-junction structures found to some enzymes. And what the similarity here is that in a deduced structure, in the middle we have a diamond, not a square. And then you have pairs of helices that are showing some hints of pairing up. Same in the crystal structures, you have the diamond in the middle, and you have pairing going on, and here. So the idea is that perhaps the transition state that we deduce based on a combined experiment may actually be real, and it may actually be referenced by the proteins and stabilized. So the conclusion of that study was that yes, the technique works, and we can actually measure now nanometer scale motions with at even sub-picometer forces, and this is not possible if you do purely mechanical measurement. And we also showed that if you make the arms longer by a factor of 2, then you can achieve the same bias, the same change in rate by using half the force. So this is a demonstration of the lever arm effect at this small length scale. And the Fourier junction responds to even a half a picometer force. It's a very, very exquisite force sensor. And we were able to map the 2D landscape by pulling in 3 different directions and deduce the structure of the transition states. So I think it's better to stop here and take questions. Thank you. If there's no question, I can keep talking.
I think it was a great lecture to show what can be done now. But more than anything else, I think it's the fact that you see this new coming field. So basically, that's just like the tip of the iceberg, of what things we can do. So that's what makes the field very exciting. And I think people can think about great biological problems that you can apply, but also you can use all your imagination and all your knowledge of physics to try to come up with new tools. So let's, questions? You were that quiet? I think the part was to do last night.
I can do that. I can keep talking.
So keep talking about that.
Oh, so I have one more slide here. Yeah. Now we're in the middle lab, we're actually using the technique to study protein DNA, protein RNA interaction. We have actually a lot of interesting data. Some of these were presented by Robo here at this meeting in this poster. And so many people ask questions to me that, this is all very nice, but this is all in vitro using purified components. Can you also do this kind of measurements in the cell? I don't know how to do it. We haven't done it, but others have. And there are some proof of principle experiments that have been done and published. Going back all the way to 1999, this is a paper by a Janeiro group where they labeled membrane receptors using the green and red molecules, the receptor molecules, and then they visualize their movements in the cell. And then, in fact, they could see these two molecules coming on and off, resulting in change in effect from the same pair of molecules. So yes, it is possible to do, but it's very difficult, and there are some technical challenges that currently do not allow you to take trajectories that you can take, in vitro studies. And Jose yesterday mentioned some things about single molecule measurements also are relevant in the cell context if they're talking about DNA, RNA, protein that exist in very low copy numbers in the cell. So in that case, that even a small fluctuation in the total number of proteins or RNA can have important implication for genetic regulation. So this is a table obtained from a review paper just published in Annual Review in Biophysics by Simon Z's group. The copy numbers of various entities in E. coli. And many of the proteins exist in really single digits. So they developed a very nice method of measuring, detecting single proteins in living cell and production of single proteins in living cell of E. coli. The challenge typically is that there is usually too high a background fluorescence to see things in the cell. And especially if the protein that you want to study is not fixed in one location. So this is an illustration. So you have some autofluorescence from the cell that gives you some background. And if you have a single protein diffusing in the E. coli cell, then it'll give you a time average signal all over the cell area, and then you won't be able to really tell that signal very well above the background fluorescence. But if the protein somehow becomes immobilized in the cell, let's say a membrane protein becomes inserted into membrane, or DNA repair protein finding a damaged DNA site on the E. coli cell and binding there, then you can actually see it because now you have one molecule in one spot, and then you can actually have enough signal to noise ratio to visualize that molecule. So this is an example. You have E. coli cells, and then you see full fluorescent spots that are localized here, and zinc intensity is actually substantially above the autofluorescent signal from the E. coli. You have two single molecules there, and this shows the photobleaching of a single molecule, demonstrating that what you're seeing is really a single molecule. And then they were also able to measure the binding and dissociation of the lactose repressor to the DNA. And it's very, very fun to read the paper published in Science last year. You see these spots of molecules in the cell if you under normal conditions, but if you actually add lactose will bind the protein, and then you reduce affinity of the protein to the DNA, so then you don't see the fixed spots anymore. And you can actually measure the kinetics of binding and dissociation using that method. Do I have more? Okay.
We would have another 10.
I don't have any very questions, but what kinds of things can you attach to fluorescent tags? Can you attach it anywhere on the protein?
That's a very good question. So on the proteins, most people use cysteine engineering. So cysteine is one of the 20 amino acids that has a thiazole at the end, and this can be reacted with a couple of chemical groups very, very specifically. So you can, although you have like 1,000 amino acids in the protein, you can label only that cysteine. Okay? With a diamorphically conjugated to that functional group. This can be done, and even by a physics graduate student. Okay. I don't know how to do it, but so we do this all the time in my lab. But this sometimes presents a problem if you have a protein that has many native cysteines. And in fact, many of the proteins that we study have 20 or 30 cysteines that we don't even bother to do this, we just give up. Now there are new technologies, for example, by Peter Church in strips that incorporates unnatural amino acid into the protein in a known location, in a desired location that you want to pass it using the stop codon trick. And that once you make the protein, then you can label this special amino acid using a dye. And that has been demonstrated by his group and a very simple system that, although but actually it doesn't work in my lab. You can get the protein, but for a large protein that we studied, it doesn't look like this amino acid is getting labeled. And I heard the same from another group. And there are also methods to label the ends of the protein, the C-terminals and terminals of the protein. And these techniques are somewhat easier compared to the unnatural amino acid. So they are also pursuing that avenue, although it's not as general. You can have a tag on a protein, a single tag, but you cannot move it around different locations of the protein so that you can measure conformation change within the protein. Now with DNA and RNA, we can, these are much easier to do. In most cases, you can just buy them with synthesized DNA, or they can be grown with the dyes already attached. And in other cases, we can buy amino labeled DNA and label it ourselves. I can show more slides.
Yeah, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay. Because I did yesterday. I did. Okay, so that's the. So what I wanted to show yesterday was some other methods of doing single molecule measurements, not fluorescent, but very creative methods. So this is one example. Trying to see the spiral movement of the myosin five on that filament. So this is actually a very simple method developed by Jeff Gallus at Rutgers University. It's called tailored particle analysis. So if you have an RNA polymerase stuck on the surface, and during transcription, it's going to make this DNA shorter and shorter. And then here there's not even an optical trap. Just you have a bead undergoing Brownian motion, but as the DNA becomes shorter, the extent of Brownian motion will decrease. Okay? So that the Brownian motion extent will be determined, and to deduce the length of the DNA. So this is simple. It doesn't really require anything expensive. Almost anyone can do it. Although it doesn't give you very good time resolution or spatial resolution, okay, because of the Brownian motion. But you can still measure the length of the DNA changing as a function of time during transcription. And this is actually a very popular technique being used, for example, to study the looping and unlooping kinetics by, for example, a lambda repressor or lambda repressor in several different labs in the States. This is also a very nice work done by this Manta lab, and they wanted to really measure the torsional properties of the DNA. And the problem with the magnetic tweezers that I mentioned yesterday was that when you rotate the magnet, then the magnetic field will rotate at the same time without any delay. The torque was just so strong being applied so that you cannot really measure anything about the torsional properties of the DNA directly. So what they decide to do here is very ingenious. So what they have is you have an optical trap here, but at the end you have a micropipette holding the other end of the DNA using this bead. And they have this inside a microscope slide, and this micropipette is actually quite long. It goes out the slide so that a student can hold it from outside the microscope and you put propellers around it, and then you rotate it like this with hands. Okay? So then what they did was, then there's a nick here in the DNA. There's a small bead that they call rotor bead. Then they apply flow in the chamber, so that this guy is actually dragged in this direction, so that it doesn't actually rotate because of the flow. What you do is that you actually use your hand to rotate the bead upstairs, and then this will actually result in the twisting of the DNA segment right here. Because you continue to accumulate twist as much as you want, and then you stop the flow. Then this DNA is able to relax, and that is measured by the rotation of the rotor bead. Okay, I don't have the movie, but that's again the idea is that you flow to fix the orientation of this bead and rotate the DNA up here so that you twist the DNA, and then you stop flow that it will relax back. In fact, what they say is that as time goes on, the bead rotates, so you see this wiggling of this bead position, and by actually measuring this decay time, they could actually use interesting properties about the torsional stiffness of the DNA. So that's that. Oh, so this is also another popular area of research related to the single ion channel experiments, where people can put a nanopore into the biological membrane and then measure current going through the pore under applied voltage. If you have DNA in one part of the chamber, DNA will actually enter the pore and translocate through the pore, resulting in the drop in the current flowing through the pore. And that can be used to distinguish different DNA molecules of different sequences. In fact, I think a lot of people got lots of money from funding agencies claiming that they would be able to do DNA sequencing using this technique. But it looks like it's not going to work for that application. But there are actually a lot of creative applications in that direction. So I think I should really stop. Okay. Thank you.
Do you have any other question? Anybody's curious? Okay, then thank CJ one more time, and back here at 10:30. In the last kiosk of Lenny, right? So you go there for a final work and fun session. And now, I want everybody to remember that the only reason we have been here and had such a great week is because of Elisa. Nós deram I think I have been on many conferences in my life, but this was just perfect. Every single time, every coffee break, every activity, you guys just really luck out. Okay? Yeah, wait, we're not done yet. Then, shouldn't do that without the entire group of people that have been seen, like Arnaldo has been here, and all the people in the that have been on the organizing committee and things like that. So if you look at that's a real full-time job. We just don't notice because we just walk out and everything works and appears great. So I want to thank everybody, Elisa in particular, for all these things, and I'll let Gerson say a few words.
Not much, but as member of the local organized committee, so this of course Elisa had all the credit for all the organization. So again, well, just to thank you in the name of the organizing committee and also the other people and the Brazilians that have been also being treated. And again, one more opportunity to thank the whole guys for coming. And so let's continue. And well, thank you, Elisa.
were many questions yesterday during my presentation, so I decided to put together two different things, trying to address some of the topics that came out yesterday. So please feel free to interrupt any moment if you want further details, because I think I have materials for like 5 hours.
We're sure about that. We'll keep you on track.
Okay. Oh no, sorry. Don't say that again. Okay. So, one thing that came out yesterday, there were many questions on how we pick the parameters in a model. So, in general, whenever you have a model, you make an assumption, for instance, on the functional form, you make an assumption on the degrees of freedom that are relevant, but still you have some parameters. For instance, yesterday we talked about the relative strength of the interactions of the different amino acids, or the interaction distances, and you can keep going. I mean, you can completely potential as much as you want. So when you define a model, you define actually a family of models with different results according to the parameters you pick. So let's say, and eventually the final validation is given by the experiment, by quantitative comparison with the experiments. And you already seen this yesterday when I showed you a couple of ways to compare with experiments, for instance, using fluorescence spectroscopy and CD as a function of time. So let's say we have an idea, we put it into a simplified model, we run a bunch of computer simulation, and yesterday I told you how to get free energy and thermodynamics information from dynamics trajectories. Assume that periodics, and we run long enough, we are in thermodynamic. So, but then we had to convince an experimental friend to do some experiment for us, and we want to compare. And to compare, we use the free energy landscape idea. So we want to get the free energy landscape as a function of a few relevant coordinates, and I'm going to touch upon the definition of the reaction coordinate. It's a pretty important topic. And in order to go from the microscopic, the dynamic simulation, to the macroscopic averages measured in experiments, and averages either in time or in space. For instance, the bulk experiments, you average over an ensemble. You can imagine in a single molecule experiment, you average over a time solution. In order to go from here to here, we have to use statistical mechanics and do the comparison. And in principle, one can pick the model and a set of parameters and do the comparison. And then, if the comparison was not perfect, you can pick another set of parameters and do a comparison, and so forth. But this is not the best way. Ideally, even before to start to do the simulation and compare with the experiment, we like to know a priori if the model is completely consistent with the experimental data. And if it is, if we can use the experimental data to guide the model to the best choice of parameters. So this is the question we asked, and particularly this came up in the framework of our simplified model. Remember, yesterday I showed you that there is a region in the parameter space, and I said that for a lack of better information, I pick the maximum gap. I decide the parameters using the maximum gap criteria. Basically pushing the minimal frustration principle as much as possible, but there is no reason to expect that this is always the best choice. So I want to know, first of all, if there is a point in the parameter space that satisfies completely a set of experimental data, and if there is, what it is. How do I do that? Rather than go in this direction, I have to go in the opposite direction. I have to start with a set of experimental data, and then I have to use, if you go in this direction, it's the direct method. You have macroscopic, you do averages with statistical mechanics, and you compare the averages. If you go in this other direction, it's an inverse method, meaning that you use averages to determine some properties of macroscopic properties. Inverse methods usually are a mess, are programmed mathematics, and usually a mess because there is no unique solution. But under certain circumstances, you can work with it quite well. And this is what we did. And another way to see this problem is the following: why we want to use this inverse method. Imagine our goal is to get a full view of this free energy landscape. That can be quite complicated in principle. Experimental data can give us a few points in the landscape, and if we believe the experiment and if everything is done correctly, this is the truth. These models are the reality. And these points are the reality. It's a true view of the free energy landscape. For instance, the energy differences of computation, and so on. But we cannot access the whole landscape experimentally. Certain regions are not populated long enough or with enough probability to measure anything. So we want, if we use a model, theoretical model, in principle you could get the whole thing, simplified model, but we don't know how to trust the accuracy of the model. So we would like to use these pieces, to start with these pieces and see if our model can be anchored to these pieces. If we can do that, and we know a priori it's possible, then we can use predictively the model, and we can do some blind tests in other points, and if we go back and forth, then we really have a picture of the whole landscape, and we can use it in a predictive fashion. So this is, and we get the full landscape, and then here I pick one of my favorite paintings that is quite complicated, and the idea is if you don't have a theoretical model, sometimes it's quite difficult to get the full picture just from a few pieces. It's the lily pad by now. Really cool. So this is the work of my previous student Sylvia Matisiak, who is now a postdoc to UC Austin. And this is the idea. So first I'm going to give you just the overview, and then if you're interested, I can give you more mathematical details. So we have a model, meaning that we pick a functional form for the Hamiltonian function. And this is in general, if we write the Hamiltonian in terms of pairwise interaction, we can write it like this, but it doesn't have to be limited to pairwise interaction. This is just an example. You can plug in your favorite Hamiltonian. You'll see it's quite general. So this Qij is a functional form, and for instance, in our simplified model, is the 10-12 potential here. And this is fixed. When we picked our model, this is the functional form. But there are parameters, for instance, these epsilon parameters, that regulate the strength of the different interactions. And these are the parameters that we trained with the inequality procedures that I explained later. So the question is it possible, first of all, does it exist, a set of epsilon such that if we have a very large set of experimental data, this model can reproduce all of them? And if the answer is yes, which one is the set of epsilon? How do we do that? So the particular set of experimental data we use are free energy differences of permutation because they are fairly easy to obtain. In protein folding, protein engineering and mutagenesis is done routinely. If you open any biochemistry journal, you find hundreds of these delta G data. But it doesn't have to be restricted to this. Anything that can be computed as a thermodynamic averages can be used. We assume that exists a set of optimal parameters, and we call it epsilon star, such that when we pick this particular set of parameters, our model reproduces exactly the experimental data. The delta G, the free energy in our model, in principle, is going to be a very complicated function of the set of parameters. I don't have to know the explicit functional form. I just have to know that it's a smooth function of these parameters, and that for this particular choice of epsilon, I get experimental data. And this is an assumption. Now, this is, if you remember how I pick this parameter needs to satisfy certain properties. For instance, the minimum frustration principle, meaning that they are in a certain region in the parameter space. I don't have complete freedom because the protein must fall. So the energy of the empty state must be lower than all the possible alternative compact structures. So already just thinking about the physical principles, I can limit the choice of parameter to a region. So whatever is my initial guess on the parameters, I know that I'm not going to be completely off, and so I have a reason to use perturbation theory. And I use perturbation theory with the framework of statistical mechanics, and we boil everything together. And we get a system of linear equations such that, and I'm going to show you the equation, just to, not to, if you are interested in all the details and this detail. So, using these ideas, the perturbation theory, and assuming that the set of parameters exists that is completely consistent with the experiment, we get a system of linear equation where the unknowns are the parameters. And because it's easy to get this delta G data, we can actually get even more data than parameters, so it's a very strict test. If we cannot produce all experimental data within the error bar, remember there are also additional conditions that the data must be here, so it's not, it's quite strict. If we can do that, it means that the model is really completely consistent with the experiments, and you can use it in a predictive fashion. So, to give you more details on how this is done, so again, this is the Hamiltonian we start from, and this is just an example. You can plug in your favorite Hamiltonian. And in order to use perturbation theory, we consider mutations of perturbation. So usually the mutations that we consider are what we call conservative mutation, meaning that we go from large to small, typically alanine or glycine. And doing so, we assume that there is a part of a part of the protein, a part of the residue that was interacting and forming an energetic interaction with the rest of the protein that is deleted. And so what happens in the Hamiltonian is that the new Hamiltonian upon mutation is the unperturbed Hamiltonian minus a piece, where this is small because it's just involving the interaction of this part of the residue that is mutated. This is what it says here. If I mutate residue K, I'm deleting the interaction involving residue K, but no, I don't have to delete all of them. This F is takes into account the fact that, for instance, if there are interactions in the backward, the mutation doesn't affect them. But so I can write it in this perturbative form, and then I can use perturbation theory because actually this is not even a perturbative expression. This is exact. This comes from the fact that in the canonical ensemble, the f over kt is equal to minus the log of the partition function. So if you have, and the partition function is the integral of exponential of minus delta h over the whole space. So if your h goes, if your Hamiltonian, can you see? If your Hamiltonian goes into H0 plus a perturbation, you have the partition function of the new system is e to the minus delta H0 e to the minus delta H. So you can divide and multiply by the whole partition function. Let me just write Z. Z0, that is the whole partition function, and you can look at this as the average of this quantity over the whole partition function. So you get that, just taking the log, you get that expression there. The difference in free energy, I call it G, but is F, is the free energy in the canonical ensemble, the airborne free energy in the canonical ensemble. If you take the log here, you get that the log of Z is equal to the log of Z0 plus the average of this quantity, the log of the average of this quantity. done over the old Hamiltonian on the perturbed system. So using this definition, you get that the difference in free energy overtaking is simply minus the log of the average of the perturbation, exponential of the perturbation of the white type. And then here you can take, if you want to do it in a perturbative function, you can take the perturbative function of the exponential in the limit delta A equal to 0, and you see that the zeroth order define that delta G is simply the average of delta H. So the zeroth order effect in the free energy is simply given by the energy. And then you have and then you take into account of the entropy implicitly when you take the higher order. But this is an exact expression simply by trivial application of statistical mechanics. And the beauty here is that this is done on the white type because it's then perturbed Hamiltonian. So we don't have to do anything new. We can evaluate the effect of perturbation or effect of mutations using the results from the white type when we consider this delta H in this form. We look at the particular mutation and the contacts we delete. Here we assume that there is no rearrangement of the structure upon mutation. This is why we consider conservative mutation. And then we can take the effect of the mutation on the free energy at different levels in the landscape. So if we have a folding reaction like this, the mutation is going to destabilize. The mutation is going to destabilize both, assuming checking at 0 as reference free energy, the free energy of the unfolded state. The mutation is going to destabilize both the transition state, and so this is delta G, what we call delta G dagger, and delta G0 is the destabilization at the folded state level. Is a delta because it's already a delta considering this difference from the reference free energy, and then you look at the change in the difference of free energy. So this is what is computed experimentally using folding rates, as Jose explained 2 days ago. And using perturbation theory, we can evaluate these quantities over the simulations you already have for the white type example. And remember, all of these is a function of our parameter epsilon. This is, yes?
I want to know how to decide this mutation to be big, small, preparatory mutation.
So we want only mutations from big to small, from large bulk side chains to alanine or glycine, because we can safely assume that in this case we just disrupt interactions. We don't form anything new in first approximation. So this is in principle, if we don't, all of these quantities in our models are going to be a function of the parameters that are entered the model, or these epsilon parameters. And we want the parameters such that this quantity match the experimental data. So again, the question is, does it exist a set of parameters such that if we have a list of, 100 of these delta G, and for each mutation you can measure 2 independent delta G, the delta G at the transition level, transition state level, the delta G at the folded level. So does it exist a set of parameters? How do we do that? So the idea is, because we assume that the set of parameters exists, and because we know that it must be restricted in this region, we cannot be completely off. We can take the first order sterility function in around this optimal set of parameters that you don't know what it is, but nevertheless we can write it in this form, where this delta G is the delta G measured in a trial initial guess point in this parameter space. And then we have this correction, and the beauty here is that we can express this term using statistical mechanics again, in terms of averages, in this form, and this is just application of, again, of the basic definition of in the canonical ensemble, and putting everything together, we get something like this. And I don't laugh because this is the next class for the people in my class. This is going to be next week talk. So we get this expression where we plug in directly the experimental data here, because the experimental data are our comparison. And all these averages here, all these canonical averages are computed in the wild type and in a trial point. So we don't have to know the position of the parameters, and with the trial point we can correct. And we can do it iteratively. If the first iteration, if the first order is too short, we fall short, we can do it iteratively. And the unknowns, the only unknowns here are this delta, that is the correction of the parameter. So it's very easy to put everything in a computer and solve a very large set of linear equations. And as I said, it can be easily over-constrained. So if there is a solution, it means that the model is completely consistent experimentally. And so we first published the idea in 2004, and then we started to apply several different cases. And one particular protein where this works very well is ribosomal protein F6. Mostly we're interested in this protein because of the wonderful work done by Mikhail Oliverberg, who's studied this protein for many years. And one thing we are intrigued about this protein is the fact that a second mutation increases the homology of one particular beta strand, beta 2, and that is here. I think it's here. This beta here increases the homology of this strand with the Alzheimer's peptide, and the protein starts to aggregate and form amyloid fibers at the myosin peptide. So we thought that was a nice system to study, look at the overall landscape, mostly because Mikhail suggested that this ability to aggregate, this increased ability to aggregate was due to detours in the landscape. So we wanted to test this with our model. So using this, our model that I introduced yesterday, and this procedure using experimental data to get the parameters, we get this agreement, and this procedure is iteratively because we do correction, we do a first order correction and then we keep correcting, and we stop the iterations when we get the chi-square smaller than 1 in order not to overload the parameters. So if we were to keep iterating the procedure, we would make all the points follow the diagonal, but it's not more meaningful than this plot because there are error bars. So whenever there is an agreement within the error bars, we stop, not to overlap the parameters. And so here we get the chi-square 0.7 with an overall correlation coefficient of 0.8. And then, as I said, we want to do a test. So Mikhail was nice enough to, he has another, so we used mutations over a set of mutation for the wild-type protein and for the circular permutants of the protein. And then Mikhail told us that he had another circular permutant. So first we did we used the same parameters, taking the parameters. We did the landscape of the circular permutants, and then he gave us the mutation, and the blind test was successful. We recovered agreement comparable with the training set. So at this point, we believe that we have a set of parameters. The model is completely consistent with the experiment, and we can use it in a predictive mode. And as I said, we want to study this particular set of mutations. Yes?
So how is it, like the chi-square is 0.5, like how bad does that to be considered not?
So chi-square, reduced chi-square more than 1 is complete agreement within the error bar. Because the chi-square is defined as the difference between, so if you want to measure the agreement between two sets, each of them with an experiment, with an error, with an intrinsic error, you look at the difference, you sum the difference between all the points So if you have x and y, that are two sets, and you have a delta x and a delta y, you do x minus y squared, and if the errors are uncorrelated, you sum the error. So this means that the two sets are completely, if this is smaller than 1, and you divide by the number of points you have, if this is smaller than 1, means that the points are in agreement within the error bound.
But it's a convention that chi square should be less than 0.5.
No, usually
0.05. So it
usually it's smaller than 1. So this is what we get. So at this point, we don't touch anything else. We fix the parameters in the model, and we can explore. We can start taking mutations because we have the amino acid identity. If you remember, these colors and sizes, so we can mimic the effect of mutations. And this is the free energy landscape we get for the wild type. And I'm using here again the reaction coordinate Q and A. Q, the fraction of negative contacts, good contacts, as written here, contacts that follow the funnel down to the folded state. And these are contacts that take away the protein from the folded state. These are misfolding contacts. So this protein starts from the unfolded state is you have very low probability of forming either negative or non-negative contacts, and there is a nice folding route to the folded state. So again, each contour, each different color is 1 kT difference, and so here this is the transition state and the starting point. We introduce this for mutation, and this is what we get. As control, we also did different set of mutations, and this protein is quite robust, and all the controls are published in this paper. This protein is quite robust. Different mutations don't change the landscape at all. You still maintain this shape. But this particular set of mutation is what we call a 6 Alzheimer, because it's the one that, as has been called by Michael. There is a quite dramatic change in the landscape. There are several differences. One thing is that the unfolded state gets more stable, it becomes stabilized. And then there is a shift. Here I just cut and pasted the position of this minimum here. There is a shift in the location of the folded state. What does it mean? So here we take all the structures in this minimum. This is an ensemble, so we have a very large set of structures, and we do some clustering, and we look at the fluctuations among the structures. Also, we take representatives at the center of the cluster, the structure that is best represent all the structures in here, and we do the same thing for all the structures in the new minimum, and compare. And my student Sabina found, after we've done this, that Daniel Otzen had a crystal structure of the 6 Alzheimer variant, and so we contacted Daniel, and he sent us, very nicely, he sent us the coordinates. And so this comparison here also includes the comparison with the crystal coordinates. So the different colors here show in each position along the sequence the displacement. The green is the displacement between the two crystal structures, the crystal of the wild type and the crystal of the Alzheimer variant, where the Alzheimer variant is very difficult to crystallize, first of all, and also crystallizes at theta, because the proteins really like to stick to each other. The blue is the average displacement inside, the fluctuations inside, the average fluctuation inside this minimum here. And the violet are the differences between, as I said, the representative of this ensemble and this ensemble. So and there is an overall very good agreement between the three sets, with the correlation between the displacement between the crystal structure, the displacement in our representative of 90%, meaning that really we capture the change, the conformational change in the folding landscape that is introduced upon mutation. And what is interesting is that this change is mostly due to fluctuation. So it's a partial unfolding. It's a part of the protein that becomes extremely flexible. It's It's not a complete shift of the structure, but some of the structure, most of the structure remain the same, and part of the structure remain. And this is the region where most of the fluctuations are observed, and this is the structure of the wild type, this is the structure of the Alzheimer's variant, and mostly, so this region is this region. It's this loop here that is bent to protect part of the structure here, but in the Alzheimer is destabilized and can fluctuate a lot. And also the and the C-terminus of the protein is complete in the crystal, in the 6 Alzheimer crystal is found, is not solved because it's all over the place. And in fact, if you look at the violet point, it goes above 15. So there is a very good agreement in this. I mean, we can predict the change in the lattice ensemble. And how does it affect the ability to aggregate? We believe, Matteo and Silvina came up with the idea, reading a lot of papers on aggregation and possible causes of aggregation, that this star here, that is kind of twisted and inverted, is protecting a region that is dangerous for aggregation. And this is what Michael calls, this residues here, what Michael calls the gatekeeper, something that some residues that are there to protect, to avoid these regions of the landscape that are dangerous. And this becomes unprotected because this part of the protein starts to fluctuate, and this can cause the exposure of the sticky part that can trigger the aggregation. So I want to test this further, and we run simulation of multiple copies of the protein in the same simulation box with some tricks. And this is what we obtain. So we obtain not just one single structure, but many different possibilities according to the simulation condition. And here I'm grouping all the different results according to the RMST from the crystal structure, the tetrameric crystal structure, and the Q in each single copy of the protein. So if we are here, means that we obtain something that is very similar to the crystal structure. We obtain aggregates that are in this form, very well ordered, so it's nice. But also we obtain these aggregates here, where indeed the protein is open and only the beta sheets remain, and they form the template, and they get together in a kind of repetitive way, and they form the template for the growing of amyloid fiber. So it seems that this is, we suggest this is the mechanism of destabilization and triggering of amyloid formation, at least in this particular protein. So at this point, I hope I've convinced you that using simplified models, though we make a lot of assumptions, still we have a powerful tool to explore very large regions of the energy landscape and understand what's going on, at least at the first order approximation level. But clearly this is not enough. If we want to understand function in more detail, we cannot stop at this level. Okay, for instance, if you ask me what is the particular interaction that stabilizes these beta sheets, I don't know, because what I'm using is an effective interaction. It takes into account many different things together, and I cannot pinpoint to the physical chemistry of what is sticking this together. But so what we decided to do was to find a way, once we have a landscape at the coarse resolution, to find a way to zoom in the interesting regions and then introduce details where needed. Not everywhere, because there are regions that, for instance, if we take your landscape here, we want to look at what's going on here. In this shoulder, for instance, there is clearly the possibility of taking a detour in the landscape. This shoulder is not appearing here. So we want to look at particular regions of the landscape, not everywhere. So this is what I've done in collaboration with the group of computer science at Rice, Lydia Scarracchi's group, and the particular student worked on this is Elizoni. And we published this paper last year. Actually, we got the cover of the journal. And so the idea is very simple. We start with a very coarse distribution model, and we introduce details iteratively. First, it's very easy, particularly if you use a carbon alpha model, it's very easy to reconstruct the backbone because the peptide bond geometry is quite robust. There are a lot of geometric constraints, so just doing some statistical analysis of the database, you can easily add some local minimization. It's easy to reconstruct a backbone geometry that is consistent with the carbon alpha, the position of the carbon alpha geometry. And it may be more than one solution, but usually there is one solution that is much better than anything else. After we have a backbone, we have to introduce the sidechain, and this is less trivial because there are two problems. One is steric clashes. We want to introduce sidechain such that, because they don't have the sidechain explicitly in the model, so you want to introduce them in order not to overlap. But not only that, you have different possible rotamer positions for sidechain, so we devised a local optimization procedure, probabilistic, but that can give a few optimized configuration for the sidechains along the protein. And then we go through a few cycles of optimization locally and globally, and eventually we do all atom minimization with the favorable force field to make sure that anything is reasonable. So I don't want to go, we have tested with several proteins and we have constructed a full landscape for several proteins to make sure of the consistency, and all these results are published, but I want to show you is what happens if we use this on S6. So now we can look, for instance, at this tool on the landscape, and this is what we get. So this is the same data presented to you before at the coarse grain level. Now they're reconstructed, and I can look more in detail why what is the